Started here. So, thank you all for coming to this month's chat, talking about encompassing diversity without tokenizing. And I I kind of came up with that title because lots of people consistently are asking me, how can I do this without making it look like I'm doing that? And for me, honestly, and it's going to be different for everyone, it's all about intent or plan. And I am going to use Second Star as an example of good. Okay, I know. I had to change. I was like, of good. So you have sweat that you're doing. You have crowns. You have something rotten, and I forgot the other one. What was the other one?
The old one, Sound of Music.
Oh, Sound of Music. No, but you have across that entire span of all the different shows, there's not what's the best way to put it? You're not doing Sound of Music and saying, oh, we're going to do a Black Maria. That would be considered tokenizing. Now, if you have someone that comes along that sings like Beyonce and could sing Maria down, sing the house down, that's one thing. But it's diversity and inclusion has this intersection where they work and also where they part. And I like that with Second Star, y'all are taking the opportunity to kind of spread things around so that, and I know this sounds bad, so that there's something for everyone, but it's also within that whole realm of being inclusive, of the stories that are told, of the opportunities to cast, expansively from what might have been originally done. So, case instance, I'm doing crowns for them, and one of the thoughts in my head is to have, whether or not it'll happen, don't know, but in my head, to have choirs come in and sing, because it's all about gospel church. And if any of you were watching at the beginning of the pandemic, every single show on Netflix was like highlighted, but there was a show called Voices of Fire out of Virginia Beach. And it literally was Pharrell, the singer, his uncle's church. And they decided to put together this gospel choir. Only thing you needed was the ability and willingness to sing gospel. It didn't care what race you were, what gender, nothing. Did not matter. And a lot of people had issues. They were like, but there are people that aren't Black singing gospel. It was like, yes. And some of them sing it better than some of us. So, get off of it. I'm like, it's a thing, but I'm looking at with crowns, like any church that could sing within that gospel realm, in my mind, would be welcome to participate as part of this extension of crowns that I'm putting out there. And others would look at that same thing and say, well, if she puts a non-Black choir, as part of the show, what is that doing? I said, it's called being inclusive. I'm not tokenizing the white choir. I'm not tokenizing the Black play. I'm being inclusive of everyone that can speak within that diaspora of gospel music. So that's the whole, when I think about encompassing diversity without tokenizing, is to always have a reason behind what you're doing and always have vision as to what that does for the community at large. So does that make sense to everyone? And it's okay for someone to disagree. It means I don't have to talk much. Everyone agrees with me? Wow. So I know we have, I know Thomas is from Vagabond Players. Yay, love that space. And then we have Nikki, who is just your ever-loving teacher of the arts. And then we also have Sean, who's with Goddard Music and, MAD. what is it that you have seen? And also, we have Kelsey and Nathan here from Second Star. What is it that you are seeing within the community as far as shows that are picked? Are there questions you have about shows that you're thinking of, shows that you want to think of, or maybe a listing somewhere that is kind of throwing you? Because everything pops up on my feed, but anything that y'all have seen or questions that you have about doing shows without being tokenizing. Yes.
As we are planning our next season, we are encouraging actors to cast diversely, like explicitly as part of the season announcement or the director's solicitation.
Okay.
And I hesitated with that a little bit, not because I don't think we should, but because I felt like it was a little bit too limiting. We are doing it, but I wondered what your thoughts were on that. If you would.
So it feels performative by saying it that way. Yes.
Okay.
I would say if your intent is, yes, to cast diversely, but also think of the shows that you are selecting to cast diversely.
Which cover a wide range.
Yes. Yeah. So as long as you have the wide range, and then a lot of it is looking at what story's being told. So a lot of, I think where a lot of theaters run into issues is when you try to stick with the classics, which we all know. You put a classic out there, it's going to sell, it's recognizable, people are going to show up. If you do something off the wall that no one's really heard of, I'm just going to throw Bear the musical out there. I know what it is because I've done it. But for your audience who do not know that, or maybe your director pool who may not know that show, they would look at that as, okay, well, are they doing that for the reason of just being able to cast this way? Or there are some theaters that are doing, instead of doing the wide array, like you were saying that y'all are doing at Vagabonds and like they're doing at Second Star, and I know they're doing it Mad. There are some companies that are saying, well, we want a Black show for Black people. We want a Latinx show for the Latin people. And that's where you get into you're skirting that line of tokenizing the shows. Because me as a performer, and I always think of it this way, as a performer, when you're looking for shows to audition for, usually we look for something that speaks to us, that we like, or that we can see ourselves in.
Right.
The harder part for theater companies is when you're trying to do something different, is getting that visual out there to let someone like, me know, Ricky, you can come audition for Sound of Music. And it's changing the lens of the audience and also the lens of the auditioners that are out there. And a lot of that can just come with messaging and being consistently, out there in terms of, these are things that we like about this piece. I am a true component, even though I do not TikTok by any means. I can't figure TikTok out to save my life. But there are companies, especially in California, that are using TikTok to do their diversity talk for them, that are doing things in terms of, Kelsey and I are going to do a TikTok. Kelsey's going to teach me how to do the waltz. I'm going to teach Kelsey how to crump. And it's all within that same TikTok thing. But then on top of that, we merge those two styles to create this new, we're going to call it a crump waltz. But that's just something, and funny, we could actually do that. So, but those are just different ways that I've seen them do those. And they're short snippets that can just go out there and live forever. And you never know the the 500 people that see that one little clip, and next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, 10,000 people have seen this clip of us doing this one little thing. And it can be, and sometimes it's just having that conversation of, okay, we're going to do, I'm trying to think of a show. Now that would be hard. I can't say Avenue Q, Gary Coleman, because he's real. Even though I have seen him cast as a person that wasn't a person of color, and I'm not sure the world let that company live that down. Nope, they didn't. So I'm trying to think of another show, but I'm actually just going to take like Sweat, for instance. Sweat's one of the shows that during the pandemic, a lot of companies were doing readings of it. And also, I think it's Mirrors with Fires, I think was another one that a lot of people were doing, where even those were accounts from real individuals. If they did not have if they could not find the actual person that fit that particular demographic, that story was told in third person. Like, this is what was heard, this is what was said, but it still gave voice to that person's character and where they sat within the diversity spectrum. But it didn't take away from, someone Hispanic reading a piece that was for someone that was Muslim or African. They kind of merged that. And I saw a lot of that with directors just finding new ways to kind of bridge gaps and learn from them. So for Vagabond, and I think a lot of the issue that you will have at Vagabond and probably at most companies is the fact that, especially with, and I'm only going to speak for the African Americans that I know, the pandemic caused a lot of us to step back. A lot of us are not coming back to theater. I'm not saying us as in me, but a lot are not coming back to theater. There used to be a list of people I could call on and be like, come on, we're doing this show. I just said, come on, we're doing this show. And they were like, oh no, child, I realized what it's like to sit down. I'm not coming back out the house. But it's finding the things that will entice them. So I'm starting to have conversations with them on, what is it that you're interested in? What is it that you want to see yourself doing on stage? And some of them are now, well, I'd like to direct. I'd like to, do something that doesn't require that I am there. Once the show opens, I'm good. That's where a lot of people are, regardless of, where they sit within the racial spectrum. But I don't think it's tokenizing to say, we are looking for specific casting. I think it's going to take time before that takes hold into the community, because I think a lot of people are also still questioning whether or not the ask is performative. And, think about it. If you go somewhere and get bad service, just in a restaurant, how long is it before you go back? How many friends have to tell you it's okay before you go back into that restaurant? It's the same thing with diversity. As weird as that sounds, as basic as that sounds, it only takes someone saying, I didn't feel seen or visible at a theater company, intended or unintended, and it takes them a while to work them way back through it. I'm getting ready to direct Dot at Essex, and they're just like, well, Ricky, can you bring people of color? No, I do not have them in my pocket, but I will put the information out there, and we're just going to have to work, because for, certain companies, they're working backwards from we haven't put shows out that specifically spoke to a specific demographic, or we're going to do, The Little Mermaid, or we're going to do The Wiz. It's that whole dichotomy of, The Wiz is going to speak to a wider demographic. And for me, if I'm casting The Wiz, I'm casting it wide open. Color doesn't matter. It's a fantasy show. Versus, The Little Mermaid, which is also fantasy. But if you ask the general acting public, what speaks to you from a diversity and or inclusion standpoint from whatever show that it is that you're putting out? And that's the messaging that I think theater companies have to start looking at and hone in on that. Why are we doing the show? And give it more reason behind it other than, we want to be able to cast diversity, so we chose the show. There has to be reason behind why you're doing those shows. And if you don't have reasonings behind them other than we just want to be diverse, that's where you're going to run into issues because your message is short. And that's going to read very harsh on the outside. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And it's an easy way around. I mean, that happens with pretty much just about any show that I've even seen. I mean, I don't know a theater company that hasn't made a faux pas in trying to explain why they picked a certain show or did a certain thing. Even Six on Broadway is still getting some flack because you're talking about the wives of, Henry, and then all of a sudden they're like, but wait a minute, they're all different colors. And there are people that have issues with that. There was a lady behind me that could not get down with Anna of Cleves. She was so upset, very upset. She was like, but she wasn't African American. I was like, woman, can you just listen to the music but that's where she was. So regardless of what you do, you're going to have to work through someone not liking it. It's almost like playing kickball. Someone's always going to be picked last, and that person's always going to be upset. But eventually that person will be picked first. So I always look at it, everything has a cycle, and we just have to cycle through it. But one of the things that I said, I think when I first started doing these chats, one way to make sure that whatever messaging you're putting out is speaking to not just your subscriber base, because most subscriber bases are very different than the community that you sit within. So there's messaging for your subscriber base, but then there's messaging for your community. Understanding that messaging for the community is key. And I will use a theater that's no longer working right now, but it was a theater company that was 100% in an African American community, not funded by an African American board at all. It took them about 25 years to realize they were in an African American community. Why? Because you have your group of friends. We started this company, so that group stayed the same. And then the minute I got in the group and I'm going, why don't we do this and this? And they were like, but no one will come. If you put it out there, they might, maybe not the first time. But it took them a while to realize how to change the messaging of their company from not only just the shows that they put out, but the communication that they put out. Because a lot of them were doing snail mail. Snail mail is really wonderful. It's only going to hit a particular demographic. How many of us on this call, when you get that mail that you have no idea where it came from, it immediately goes into that receptacle called the trash? Most of us. Every now and then I will go through a junk mail craze where I just want to read everything and just see how crazy people get with trying to get me to buy something that doesn't belong to me. But that messaging, again, creates that difference that that brings people in different ways. So the minute for that particular company, they started doing, you know, postcards, things left at the post office, things left at the grocery store, things left at church. We were papering cars, but then I decided to stop doing that because I realized how irritating it is when I come out and see a piece of paper on my car. So I was, and plus sometimes you set cars off just trying to put something under the windshield. So I was like, you know what, I'm not doing that anymore. But we also did little business cards, which were easy. So every show that I directed, the entire cast got all little tiny business cards, and I'm like, pass it out. I said, it doesn't have to be with anyone that you even know. You can just be in the grocery store and be, hey, how you doing? I'm so-and-so. I'm doing the show. You might be fun. You can come see it. But that started to change how not only the community viewed them, but also how they interacted with the community. And honestly, I'll probably say they probably lasted about 12 years longer once they got into realizing the community that they were in and became more engaged in it. I think sometimes community theaters are passive. They wait for everyone to show up. And a lot of people can be right next door and have no idea that you're there. So your messaging has to be like major. I didn't even know Vagabond was there until I was asked to come choreograph something there by one of my directors. And I'm going, I hang out down here. And I would literally walk past Vagabond.
You are not the only one. And we are aware of that. I don't know. We are aware of that issue. I don't know if we're doing enough at this moment to reach out to the community directly around us.
But yeah, it requires, sometimes it requires that thinking outside the box, or, you know, putting on the show, putting on crowns and just saying, you know what, we're going to do it and we're going to make this work because it's important. Oh my gosh, there's a kitty. Literally look right between. But it's doing those unique things. I know for Mad, I was talking to one of the past directors who did, I didn't even know this, but did a really cool, inclusive acting piece. What was it called? The Weird Sisters, where two of the actors were blind. And again, that's an inclusion thing that director took the opportunity to do and bring that in so that that particular, and I'm calling because I work with that marginalized community, felt included and felt seen. And they weren't used in, I always think about whenever I see Into the Woods and they have the blind sisters, it always sits wrong with me. I know it's a joke, and I've talked to some of my coworkers, they were like, yeah, that doesn't bother us. But just for me, I'm going, okay, but he took it upon himself to make inclusive directorial decisions to include an external community that might not have had that opportunity elsewhere. So that speaks volumes. And yes, Sean, y'all should, even though that was a while ago, you should still capitalize on that.
They have been in other productions with us more recently, so we can probably capitalize on that too.
Yeah, and when I say capitalize, it's not to say, oh, we have people who are blind on stage, but it's literally just telling that story. So sometimes it's, you know, asking them if they want to just do a small clip on why they feel valued or included, or how did that feel doing that particular piece or that part. And that could be part of a marketing, you know, track that you do for the company. And it doesn't have to run a lot. It could just be picked up and done different ways. Like I just did a women's video for Confidence Theatrics. And then I'm planning to do, a couple of other videos throughout the year where I'm just pulling different things, and I can pull one out and do it, pull one particular one out and say, okay, I'm going to use this video for this particular month or this particular holiday. But it's being able to recycle your messaging. And sometimes it works better in other places than others. So whatever you have, keep it, and then just parse it out to where it can be really utilized quite well. And let me enrich in. So any other questions that anyone has about concerns or questions about tokenizing when either selecting shows, whether it's casting, whether it's messaging, whether it's the board, because I've heard that one pop up a couple of times. I'm a component of, and I've said this many times before, the work of breaking down the walls that are currently up about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and getting down to those deep conversations. That work of breaking that down is going to take a moment, and it's going to take a lot of work. And I've always said, you do not have to be a person of color in order to be in the fight to break down those walls. Many theater companies, they were like, we don't have any people of color on our board. And I'm going, are the people on your board willing to stand up for the cause? And they're like, yes. And I said, you're way ahead of those that don't. There are boards that have 5 people on it and there's only one leading the charge, and the other ones are sitting back going, you go ahead and you do that. So we would all love to look around and see representation and have everyone that comes to our audition tables or walks in our doors to see someone that represents them in some way. It's going to take a moment before we get there. Just keep working towards it. People recognize real allies probably before real allies realize that they are real allies. That was a lot of R's. And yeah, real allies will always step up at that moment when they need to step up and support, whatever it is that you're trying to do. So hello, doctor, how are you? Doing good?
Doing well. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we have been talking about encompassing diversity without tokenizing, and was talking about editing your messaging as far as you're trying to reach out and get certain people, and that even when you're saying we're looking to cast, diversely for our season or our particular show, and finding different ways to do that. And it just hit me, one of the other things, a lot of that messaging will have to be, will be repetitive. You just have to find different ways to say it so that it doesn't fall on deaf ears. That is probably one of the hardest things. I am trying, as I work through things, to not use the word diversity as much, because diversity is now that word that when you say it, people automatically click off. So I've been using, inclusion a little bit more. Intersectionality, I love the word, but it sounds so professory to me that all of a sudden I don't have a good sensory perception when I say it or hear it, because it just sounds very lofty, like I'm getting ready to hear a thesis. Though I do love the word. I just have to, I have to watch where I use it, because that's also another word that I know there are several theaters in Baltimore, that's all they use. We're here to discuss the intersectionality, and I've heard people go, I'm not sure what that means, which is another reason why I don't use it as much. I have to look it up every single time I'm trying to use it. I'm like, okay, what? Okay, the intersection of this and that. Why don't you just say I'm the intersection of? But I get it. I get it. We all have Jesse Jackson words that we use. That just happens to be the new one for diversity right now, intersectionality. But what other issues are the companies that you are with or watching or visiting facing in terms of inclusion, getting people, now that things are starting to open back up? Are you seeing different things come through the door, or are you seeing the same old, and that's where your head is hitting the wall? Anyone? I saw your hand go forward, Kelsey.
So I think, I know I had to think about it, and I'm trying to think of how best to phrase it, I guess, too. But I think, like, so because we haven't actually opened yet, our first thing isn't coming up until August. Like, we have some buffer and some time and all of that. And I think what, at least I can speak for me as artistic director, and I don't know that I'm hitting my head against a wall so much as I feel like I understand where it's coming from, and I'm trying to figure out how to encourage a shift. Is like, production teams often are people that you work with and you trust and and you want them to be your people. Like, as a director, I get that. I've like, when I did all my educational stuff and now I'm switched to a new school, and I'm like, can't you all come with me? Like, we had our stuff down. We were right. We could do tech week with no tears.
Yes.
Everybody finds their group. And I think that it's an awesome way to get new people involved, because occasionally you have somebody bringing in someone you haven't worked with. But what happens when how do we encourage people to not always bring the same?
We get director proposals and they're the same music director, choreographer, stage manager they've worked with before.
And or that we have in the rest of the season.
Often there's not diversity in that group, and we're trying to suggest that you maybe work with other people.
Or like, I know the mentorship piece is one that's come about, and like that's my next step is to go, like, we have a bunch of those. I have a list of people who've been like, I might be interested in directing, like you're saying. They're like, I don't want to act anymore, I'm done with that, but I can direct. And I'm like, cool, let's get you directing.
It's fun. I would say for those, and it's something that I keep toying with, but I realize that I'm going to need space to do it. Those mentorships are actually really good. You can throw all the people that want to do mentoring at me for crowns. Just toss them on. I'll take them all. But a lot of that is really cultivating other people. And theater is probably, as great as we are at performing, we are not at all good at cultivating and succession planning for who's after, who's the next one coming down. I love doing that when I'm choreographing. All my dance captains, or even the sub dance captains, I'll pick 2, maybe 3. And then there'll always be that phone call. Ricky, can you choreograph? Nope, but here are 3 people you can get. And they're like, what? I was like, they did a show with me and I didn't kill them. They're worth it. Go for it. So that's just something that I do. I know a couple of other directors that are always trying to pull in an assistant director or someone like that to kind of, one, as those of us that do stuff get busier and busier, it's always very helpful to have someone cultivated that is within that group, your people. I totally get that you can actually utilize for those things. A lot of, and I have found tons of talent in parents. Of course, that means you're doing shows with children. Not my favorite, but I get what comes out of it. But also within the youth groups that I do work with, there are so many kids that love the tech side of things that dislike any other side. I choreographed a what was that sing along that everyone was able to do like around November. You could do all the songs for free. It was something that Broadway put out. I forgot what it was, but everyone was trying to do it in the area. And I had to choreograph a couple of shows that were going on. And there was this one young girl. She was very quiet. She could draw like nobody's business. She would just be sitting there and scribbling. And I'm going, you want to come dance? She was like, hold on, I just got to get this last petal. And I'm looking at it, and there's this 3D flower growing out of her notebook. And the director was like, I really wish she would dance more. I was like, do you have a scenic designer for this one day show? And they were like, no. I was like, yeah, I do now. And they were like, but she's 11. I said, she's better than most adults I know that are getting paid to do it. And she ended up doing the scenic design. My niece did the scenic design for me for Motherhood Out Loud. All the paintings that were hanging up were all hers. Things that she had drawn in her, I don't like anybody, my life is over time. I was like, can I use those? And I blew them up and put them on the wall. So sometimes it's cultivating something new out of someone that they didn't think. So now she's in college taking, even though she's going for statistics, her minor is performance scenic design. So it's something she was like, maybe I could do something with this. We're like, get a 401k first, do that on the side. But it's just one of those things where I get exactly what you're saying, Kelsey, as far as finding that diversity or just different people to be included within a group so that that one core group is not consistently locked down. And a lot of that is just starting the conversations from the start, which I know you guys are doing. But I would really push, especially for you guys, push the mentorship piece of it. I do not see why that could not be, and this is just me talking off the top of my head, why that couldn't be a requirement. If you're putting on to direct, you get to pick, for 2 roles, you need to pick from our pool of people, not to run it, but just as a training, mentoring someone. That's part of you working with us, is that you help us grow our community and train our community. I don't think you'll lose anybody with that. I don't think you would. So, Dr. Garcon, how are things over at Laura Mill? Y'all just got through doing vagina monologues?
Yes, actually, yeah, this past weekend was opening weekend and went well. And one of the things I was pleasantly happy to see, and it was quite a diverse cast, which is always good. But one of the things I'm thinking in terms of things that we can do just as a whole, as we go to different shows and we support other theaters, and we see folks who are doing stuff, I don't think it's beneath us if we go to a show and we see that, let's say you directed blah, 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 that afterwards you can come and say, hey, love the show, blah, 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 you directed. Would you be interested in maybe doing something at Laurel Mill? And that would be not only just reaffirming for what they're doing, but that would be a different way of just sort of without, let's say, fully advertising. You say, well, I'm targeting you because of blah, blah, blah. But if you literally see someone, they have talent, you feel that's something that you could bring that could diversify your offerings or whatever. I think being proactive, whether it's from a directing standpoint, whether it's from an acting standpoint. Oh my gosh, you were awesome. Have you heard of Laurel Bill? We have some shows. It'd be great if you could audition or something, because sometimes it's just getting your name out so that folks would be aware, and
Yeah,
it makes a difference.
that used to happen a lot. Wow, this is way pre-pandemic. Watch Awards. Literally, Watch Awards was always a place where I called it scalping season, because we would always watch and scalp all the talent and be like, oh my gosh, okay. Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that show. It was amazing. And, people would walk and be like, so what are you doing next season? I'm like, I'm booked until 2028 or whatever. So it really is just, I agree with you, Dr. Reggie, that when you see the talent, whatever it is, or seeing really good lighting, I love great lighting, and I love people that can do great sound design, and those are probably the hardest ones to actually grab. I normally get no's from the people that I ask because they're pretty locked down where they are, but I have no problem asking. Eventually I'll get a yes because I'll wear you down. So a lot of that is literally just being open to, asking people to do different things. I never thought that I'd be able to get someone to go from Charles County to Essex to do a show. But I asked. And they were like, sure, I'll come stage manage. I'm like, you do know that's not paid, right? Just making sure, because that's a long drive. And they were like, yeah, I'd love to. It's a unique show. Okay. And they said, and if they have someone I can train, and that way I don't have to be there the whole time. So it literally is having those conversations to just ask. You will get a no if you don't ask, because you didn't give them an opportunity to say yes. So just ask. A no is nothing but another opportunity to try again later with a different tone. Come a different way. And then if all else fails, beg. Thank you guys for coming. Hi, Celia. But yeah, so when it comes to doing things, and it is perfectly okay, especially if one of my favorite things that a lot of people say, it's tokenizing. I don't call it that. If you're going to do Big River, please do not say we're going to do Big River and you don't ask me what his name is. The soul African-American guy that's not soul, but
Jim.
Thank you. It's such a simple name and I can never remember it. But I have seen people, even when I was living in North Carolina, they were like, oh, we're going to do Big River. And the next thing you know, Ricky, do you know any black guys, older gentlemen that played? I was like, that's a role you have people that are willing to come out for that one before you say you're going to do the show, because they're not going to jump out the woodwork. Or if you are going to do, there have been truly issues with getting angels for rent. Sometimes you have to pre-plan for whatever show that you're choosing, to make sure that you have individuals that want to do it and the ability to cast it. And I know that's really hard in the DMV because everyone's doing the exact same shows over and over again, and it's crossing over, and it's hard to find an all-female show that you can cast, because there's always a show that has 5 men in it and you only have 2 that show up. And out of the 2 that show up, 1 is good. So I get it. So then my question would be, when people do 12 Angry Men, how is it that 12 Angry Men can get cast? But if you do August Osage, you're hunting for the 4 men that are needed? Is it the show, or is it, I'm just trying to figure out, how can you get 12 men for one show, but you can't get 4 for the other, and they're both plays? I get the musical thing. Musicals, I just take that out of the realm of conversation, because that's just different. But I wonder, when you're looking at play to play, what would make someone go to one and not the other within the same company or within the same town? And they're not booked doing anything else, because they all show up in the front row to see the show. So just things to think about, that when you're ask for what you want, ask for what you need, and just be willing to change your messaging in order to get that across without, screaming, we need Latinx this, or we need, African American, or we're going to do Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and now we need, this entire group of LGBTQ. So it's being open to different ways to view what it is that you're doing. And yeah, that's where my brain kind of stopped. Questions, thoughts, comments? Tommy, look like you're going to say something.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm taking it all in.
Okay. Good. Sean, you okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Also taking it in.
I know.
I
I
think
throw a
about
lot
we
at
go
y'all
fly
all the
towers.
time. Yeah. But don't be afraid to just put it out there. And I like what Reginald said, as far as if you go to see other shows, talk to the different people. Sometimes people are stuck where they are and don't know. It's not that they want to get out, but they're just like, I've been here for so long, where else would I go? So, yeah. And now that it's around that time for most boards to start recruiting for new board members, now is the time to go to these different companies, and because a lot of people are just looking for change, not for any particular reason. No one did anything wrong or right, just looking for change. Set your theater company up to be that change for whoever is looking for it. That's the best way for me to put it out there, whatever that is. Anything else? I might have actually done under an hour this time. Cool. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it when y'all come hear me just flap my lips.
No, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And this shall be posted by the end of the week. But thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Ricky.
You're welcome. Bye.